A young woman stands before Judy Sheindlin, tears streaming down her face as she clutches ultrasound photos that could unlock a $1.2 million inheritance. But something isn't right. The sharp-eyed Sheindlin notices a detail that shatters this perfect picture. In the next hour, a web of deception will unravel, destroying a family's trust and exposing a scheme so calculated it would shock even the most seasoned courtroom veterans. This is the story of how a desperate quest for wealth led to one of the most brazen pregnancy scams ever attempted in Sheindlin's courtroom. The Matthews family had always been distinguished in Boston's elite social circles, their wealth spanning 3 generations of shrewd business investments. But their carefully maintained facade began crumbling after the passing of family matriarch Eleanor Matthews, whose final will spark a firestorm of controversy among her grandchildren. Eleanor's estate, valued at $1.2 million, came with an unusual stipulation. The entire sum would go to the first grandchild who produced a great-grandchild for the Matthews lineage. This condition transformed what should have been a time of mourning into a desperate race between cousins, with Joey Matthews emerging as the apparent victor just 3 months after the will's reading. Joey, a 28-year-old marketing executive with a string of failed relationships behind her, stunned her family with news of her pregnancy. Her timing raised eyebrows, particularly from her brother James, who had always been the family's voice of reason. James, a pediatric surgeon with a reputation for integrity, found himself questioning the convenient timing of his sister's announcement. The Matthews family dynamics had always been complex. Joey grew up in Eleanor's shadow, constantly seeking approval but never quite measuring up to her grandmother's exacting standards. Her childhood was marked by academic achievements and extracurricular successes, yet Eleanor's praise remained elusive. James, on the other hand, had naturally fallen into the role of family favorite, his career choice and steady personality aligning perfectly with Eleanor's values. As Joey's pregnancy announcement circulated through Boston's social circles, subtle inconsistencies began emerging. Her refusal to name the father raised questions. Her sudden withdrawal from family gatherings and suspicious medical appointments at obscure clinics added layers of mystery. Most telling was her adamant refusal to use the family's long-trusted medical providers, breaking a tradition that spanned decades. The situation reached a breaking point when James discovered discrepancies in Joey's medical documentation. His professional experience flagged several red flags in her ultrasound reports, leading him to file a formal contest against her inheritance claim. This action fractured the family further, with relatives taking sides and long-buried resentments surfacing. The case landed in Sheindlin's courtroom after gaining media attention, bringing with it a tangle of medical records, family testimony, and complex emotions. Joey's claim to the inheritance hinged on proving her pregnancy's legitimacy, while James shouldered the burden of exposing what he believed to be an elaborate deception. The stakes extended beyond the inheritance. The Matthews family's reputation in Boston society hung in the balance. Their charitable foundation, responsible for millions in annual donations to medical research, faced scrutiny. The possibility of a fraudulent pregnancy claim threatened to unravel not just family bonds, but generations of social and professional connections. As both siblings prepared their cases, the courtroom became the stage for a drama that would expose not just the truth about Joey's pregnancy, but the deep-seated wounds and rivalries that had festered beneath the Matthews family's polished exterior. The question wasn't just about who would inherit Eleanor's millions. It was about whether this prestigious family would survive the truth Sheindlin was about to uncover. Joey Matthews stepped into Sheindlin's courtroom wearing a carefully chosen navy blue maternity dress, her hand protectively placed over her supposedly growing belly. Her performance was calculated to project the image of a mother-to-be, down to the slight waddle in her walk and the occasional touch to her lower back, suggesting discomfort. The courtroom fell silent as she took her place at the plaintiff's podium. Her testimony began with a well-rehearsed account of her pregnancy journey. Joey described morning sickness, doctor's appointments, and the emotional moment she first heard her baby's heartbeat. Her voice trembled as she spoke about her grandmother Eleanor, expressing how thrilled she would have been to know about her first great-grandchild. But Sheindlin's penetrating gaze never wavered. Her decades of experience had taught her to spot the subtle signs that separated genuine emotion from theatrical display. As Joey presented her medical documentation, including ultrasound images and blood test results, Sheindlin's questions became increasingly precise. The first crack in Joey's testimony appeared when Sheindlin inquired about her prenatal care provider. Joey named Dr. Patricia from Boston Women's Care, but her brother James immediately noted that no such doctor existed at that facility. Joey quickly backtracked, claiming she had meant to say Dr. Patricia Chong, but the damage was done. Sheindlin's eyebrow raised slightly, a gesture that experienced courtroom observers knew spelled trouble. The questioning turned to Joey's ultrasound images. She presented 3 sets of scans, dated 6 weeks apart. To the untrained eye, they showed the progressive development of a fetus. However, when Sheindlin requested the original digital copies, Joey claimed they were unavailable due to a computer system crash at her doctor's office. James's attorney seized this opportunity to present evidence that would shake the foundation of Joey's case. He called forward Dr. Michael Richardson, head of obstetrics at Boston General Hospital. Dr. Richardson's testimony introduced the first major blow to Joey's credibility. He pointed out inconsistencies in the ultrasound images metadata, suggesting they might have been altered. Joey's composure began to crack under Sheindlin's relentless questioning about her medical history. When asked about previous visits to fertility specialists, she stumbled over dates and details. Her answers became increasingly contradictory, especially regarding the timeline of her pregnancy. According to her initial documents, she would have conceived barely hours after Eleanor's will was read, a coincidence that Sheindlin found particularly interesting. The courtroom atmosphere grew tenser as Joey's testimony continued. She couldn't name basic details about her prenatal vitamins when asked, despite claiming to take them religiously. When questioned about her last ultrasound appointment, she gave a date that fell on a Sunday, when the clinic was closed, another detail that didn't escape Sheindlin's attention. Perhaps the most damaging moment came when Sheindlin asked about Joey's morning sickness medication. Joey confidently named a brand that, as James's attorney quickly pointed out, had been recalled from the market 2 years ago. Her face paled as she realized her mistake, and her hand, which had been so carefully cradling her alleged bump, dropped to her side. As the initial testimony drew to a close, the courtroom was divided. Some observers remained sympathetic to Joey, seeing her inconsistencies as the natural confusion of an expectant mother under stress. Others, particularly those who caught Sheindlin's subtle reactions, sensed that something far more troubling was unfolding. Joey's final statement was meant to be emotional, a heartfelt plea about carrying on her grandmother's legacy. Instead, it raised more questions than it answered. She mentioned feeling the baby kick at what would have been just 8 weeks of pregnancy, a biological impossibility that caused Sheindlin to exchange a knowing look with her clerk. The initial testimony concluded with Joey looking considerably less confident than when she entered. As she returned to her seat, Sheindlin's expression remained unreadable, but her reputation for detecting deception suggested that Joey's performance had not been as convincing as she might have hoped. The stage was now set for what promised to be an even more revealing investigation. The investigation into Joey Matthews' pregnancy claim began to unfold with the precision of a master watchmaker dismantling a counterfeit timepiece. Each piece of evidence removed revealed another layer of deception beneath, starting with the medical records Joey had presented to support her case. Digital forensics expert Thomas took the stand, bringing with him a devastating analysis of Joey's ultrasound images. Using advanced imaging software, Thomas demonstrated how the dates on the ultrasound images had been digitally manipulated. The original metadata revealed that all 3 scans had been taken on the same day, not from different stages of pregnancy as Joey had claimed. More troubling still, the images themselves appear to have been purchased from a website specializing in providing false medical documentation. The investigation then turned to Joey's supposed medical provider, the non-existent Dr. Patricia, or Chong, as Joey had later claimed. A thorough search of medical licenses in Massachusetts revealed no OB/GYN practicing under either name. The address Joey had provided for her prenatal appointments led to a vacant office space that had been empty for the past 8 months. Bank records painted an equally damning picture. 3 days after Eleanor's will was read, Joey had made a series of suspicious transactions. First, a payment of $5,000 to a company called Digital Solutions Pro, a business that, upon investigation, specialized in document manipulation. This was followed by smaller payments to various medical supply companies, presumably to purchase pregnancy-related props to support her deception. The testimony of Joey's former assistant, Rebecca Torres, proved particularly illuminating. Torres revealed how Joey had ordered her to research pregnancy symptoms and common prenatal medications, creating detailed spreadsheets to track what symptoms should appear at what stages. Torres had initially believed this research was for a marketing project, only realizing its true purpose when she recognized the symptoms Joey began claiming to experience matched their research timeline exactly. Joey's carefully constructed facade began to crumble further when her regular pharmacist, Martin Goldman, testified. According to Goldman's records, Joey had never filled any prenatal vitamin prescriptions or pregnancy-related medications. However, she had purchased several items designed to simulate pregnancy symptoms, including prescription-strength nausea medication typically used by actresses during long film shoots. The investigation uncovered a pattern of calculated deception extending beyond just medical documentation. Joey's internet search history, obtained through a court order, revealed months of research on topics like how to fake pregnancy symptoms, undetectable fake pregnancy belly, and foolproof ultrasound editing. These searches began just hours after Eleanor's will was read, suggesting premeditation in her scheme. Cell phone records proved equally incriminating. Text messages between Joey and an unknown number discussed payment for convincing documentation and guaranteed authenticity. The number was eventually traced to Harry Weber, a former medical records clerk who had been fired from Boston General Hospital for stealing patient information. Weber, when confronted with the evidence, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Security footage from various locations around Boston further undermined Joey's pregnancy claims. Videos from her gym showed her engaging in high-intensity workouts that would have been inadvisable for someone in her claimed stage of pregnancy. Footage from a local bar showed her consuming alcohol on multiple occasions, directly contradicting her testimony about following strict prenatal health guidelines. Perhaps the most damaging evidence came from Joey's own social media accounts. While she had been careful to maintain her pregnancy story in public, her private messages told a different tale. In a particularly revealing exchange with a college friend, she had bragged about finding a foolproof way to claim her grandmother's inheritance, describing her plan as the performance of a lifetime. The investigation also revealed Joey's historical pattern of deception. Former colleagues came forward with stories of previous schemes, including faked illness to claim insurance payouts and invented qualifications on job applications. Each incident demonstrated her skill at manufacturing evidence to support her false claims, though none had approached the scale of her current deception. Medical experts provided the final devastating blow to Joey's case. Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, a leading obstetrician, analyzed Joey's claimed pregnancy timeline and symptoms, pointing out numerous impossibilities and contradictions. The fetal development shown in Joey's ultrasound images didn't match standard medical progression, and certain claimed symptoms occurred at biologically impossible times. As the mountain of evidence grew, Joey's demeanor in court transformed. The confident, glowing mother-to-be was replaced by an increasingly nervous woman who couldn't keep her story straight. Her hand, which had so often rested protectively on her stomach, now fidgeted constantly with her jacket buttons. The pregnancy bump that had seemed so convincing at the start of proceedings appeared to shift unnaturally when she moved, drawing suspicious glances from the courtroom observers. Sheindlin observed each new piece of evidence with growing intensity, her experience in detecting deception clearly signaling that she was assembling the pieces of a much larger puzzle. The investigation had moved beyond simply disproving a pregnancy. It had uncovered a sophisticated scheme that raised serious questions about the lengths someone would go to claim an inheritance. The breakthrough in exposing Joey Matthews' elaborate deception came from an unexpected source. Harry Weber, the former medical records clerk who had helped Joey fabricate her pregnancy documentation, arrived at the courthouse carrying a silver laptop and years of guilt. His testimony would shatter any remaining doubt about Joey's claims. Weber's voice trembled as he described his role in the scheme. He explained how Joey had approached him through an underground network of document forgers, offering him $50,000 to create convincing medical records. Weber had access to legitimate ultrasound images from his time at Boston General Hospital, which he modified to include Joey's information. He demonstrated live in the courtroom how he had altered dates, names, and medical data using sophisticated editing software. The tech expert's analysis of Weber's laptop revealed a folder labeled Matthews Project, containing original versions of every document Joey had submitted to the court. The metadata told the complete story. Each file had been created and modified in the weeks following Eleanor's will reading. Weber had even kept their email exchanges, where Joey provided specific instructions about what changes to make and how to backdate the documents. But the most damning evidence came from Joey's own phone. Weber, in an attempt to protect himself, had secretly recorded their meetings. The recordings, played in Sheindlin's courtroom, captured Joey's voice clearly discussing how to make the fake pregnancy convincing. "The ultrasound has to be perfect," she insisted in one recording. "My brother's a pediatric surgeon. He'll spot any mistakes immediately." As the recordings played, Joey's carefully maintained composure crumbled. Her face drained of color as her own voice exposed her calculated plan. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as she discussed the technical details of document forgery, the timeline for showing different pregnancy symptoms, and even her strategy for handling questions from suspicious family members. Weber's testimony also revealed Joey's desperate attempts to maintain her deception. He described late-night phone calls where she demanded emergency adjustments to medical dates that didn't align with her public appearances. She had even created a fake emergency room visit record to explain why she couldn't attend a family event where her brother had planned to bring his own ultrasound equipment. The final piece of evidence came from Joey's personal diary, discovered in Weber's possession. She had given it to him as collateral, ensuring his silence by providing him with written proof of her scheme. The diary entries detailed her mounting financial troubles, her resentment toward her brother's success, and her increasingly desperate need to claim the inheritance. One entry, dated the day after Eleanor's will reading, stated plainly, "I'll never have a baby naturally, but who says it has to be natural? $1 million is worth a little creative thinking." Sheindlin's questioning of Weber revealed the full scope of the deception. The fake pregnancy bump Joey wore was a high-end theatrical prosthetic, ordered from a specialty company that supplied movie productions. Her morning sickness symptoms were induced by carefully timed doses of ipecac syrup. Even her maternity clothes had been strategically purchased and altered to create the most convincing silhouette. As Weber's testimony concluded, Joey's attorney attempted to discredit him, suggesting he was lying to save himself from prosecution. But the evidence on his laptop, combined with the audio recordings in Joey's own diary, created an irrefutable chain of proof. Every document, every symptom, every medical record had been fabricated with meticulous attention to detail, except for the one crucial mistake that had initially caught Sheindlin's attention. The breakthrough had transformed the case from a simple inheritance dispute into something far more serious. Joey Matthews hadn't just attempted to claim her grandmother's money through deception. She had orchestrated a complex fraud involving medical record forgery, witness manipulation, and the corruption of healthcare documentation. The implications extended far beyond the civil court where her case had begun. Sheindlin's courtroom fell into absolute silence as she prepared for her final questioning of Joey Matthews. The tension in the air was palpable as Joey returned to the stand, her designer maternity dress now seeming more like a costume than clothing. Sheindlin took a moment to arrange the evidence before her, each paper representing another thread in Joey's unraveling deception. The questioning began softly, almost conversationally. Sheindlin asked Joey about her childhood memories of Eleanor, about family traditions, about the values her grandmother had instilled in the Matthews family. Joey responded cautiously, her answers painting a picture of a privileged but pressure-filled upbringing. As she spoke about Eleanor's expectations, her voice carried hints of long-buried resentment. Sheindlin's approach shifted subtly as she turned to the subject of Joey's fertility history. Her questions became more precise, each one building upon the last. She asked about previous consultations with fertility specialists, dates of treatments, and specific medical procedures. Joey's answers grew increasingly confused as she tried to maintain her fabricated timeline while avoiding contradictions with the mountain of evidence already presented. The turning point came when Sheindlin produced Joey's diary. She read entries spanning the past 5 years, each one revealing Joey's growing desperation about her inability to conceive naturally. The words were raw, emotional, filled with pain and anger. Joey's face crumbled as her private thoughts echoed through the courtroom. These weren't the words of someone joyfully expecting a child. They were the words of someone who had given up hope of ever becoming pregnant. Sheindlin pressed further, questioning Joey about her financial situation before Eleanor's death. Bank statements revealed mounting credit card debt, failed business ventures, and desperate attempts to maintain her socialite lifestyle. The inheritance wasn't just about family legacy. It was about survival in the wealthy circles Joey had grown accustomed to inhabiting. As pressure mounted, Joey's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Her hands trembled as she reached for a glass of water. The prosthetic pregnancy bump shifted noticeably under her dress. When Sheindlin asked her to explain the inconsistencies in her ultrasound dates, Joey's response was barely audible. The courtroom leaned forward, sensing the imminent breakdown. Sheindlin then delivered her masterstroke. She presented Joey with 2 photographs taken on the same day, one from her social media showing a pronounced pregnancy bump, another from a security camera at her gym showing her regular figure during an intense workout session. The timestamp was unmistakable. Joey stared at the images, her mouth opening and closing without sound. The floodgates finally broke. Joey's composure shattered completely as years of frustration, desperation, and shame poured out. Through tears, she revealed the truth about her infertility diagnosis 3 years earlier. She spoke about the pressure of being the family disappointment, about watching her brother succeed effortlessly while she struggled. The pregnancy scheme hadn't started as a grand plan. It had begun as a desperate grab for both financial security and family validation. Sheindlin listened to Joey's confession with a mix of sternness and understanding. Her questions now focused on understanding the extent of the deception. Each answer revealed new layers of the scheme: the network of paid accomplices, the carefully orchestrated doctor's appointments, the strategic use of social media to support her story. The scale of the fraud was staggering. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as Joey finally removed her prosthetic bump, the physical representation of her deception falling away to reveal the truth beneath. Her brother James, despite his anger at her actions, couldn't hide his own tears as he watched his sister's public undoing. The Matthews family's private pain had become a public spectacle. In the final moments of questioning, Sheindlin addressed not just the legal implications of Joey's actions but the moral weight of her choices. She spoke about the trust broken, not just within the family but in the medical system she had manipulated. Joey's scheme had involved corrupting medical records, bribing healthcare workers, and creating false documentation that could have had far-reaching consequences beyond her immediate goal. The confrontation concluded with Joey's full admission of guilt, her words echoing through the hushed courtroom. The sophisticated deception she had maintained for months had crumbled under the weight of truth, leaving behind a family in crisis and a legacy tarnished by desperation. As Joey left the stand for the final time, her shoulders slumped in defeat, the gravity of her actions finally fully apparent to everyone present. The legal consequences of Joey Matthews' elaborate deception extended far beyond the simple matter of inheritance. Sheindlin's final ruling set in motion a series of events that would reshape not only the Matthews family but also set precedents for future inheritance fraud cases. The immediate civil penalties were severe. Sheindlin not only denied Joey's claim to the inheritance but also ordered her to pay substantial restitution to cover the court costs and legal fees incurred by her brother James. The ruling emphasized how Joey's actions had wasted valuable court resources and undermined the integrity of the legal system. Joey's scheme had crossed multiple legal boundaries, prompting the district attorney's office to launch a criminal investigation. The fabrication of medical records constituted healthcare fraud, a federal offense carrying potential prison time. The involvement of Harry Weber, the former medical records clerk, had compromised patient privacy laws and violated HIPAA regulations, adding another layer of criminal liability. The Massachusetts Medical Board launched its own investigation into the network of corruption Joey had exposed. Her actions had revealed vulnerabilities in medical record systems and highlighted the need for stricter verification protocols. Several healthcare facilities began implementing new security measures to prevent similar frauds in the future. Eleanor's will required significant modification in light of the revelations. The family's attorneys worked to restructure the inheritance conditions, adding stringent verification requirements for any future claims. The new terms explicitly outlined consequences for fraudulent attempts to claim the inheritance, using Joey's case as a cautionary example. The professional fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Joey's marketing firm terminated her employment, citing ethical violations and damage to their reputation. Her business connections, carefully cultivated over years in Boston social circles, dissolved as news of her deception spread. The Matthews family name, once synonymous with integrity in Boston's medical community, now carried the taint of scandal. Financial institutions began reviewing other transactions involving Joey, fearing her deception might extend beyond the inheritance scheme. Credit card companies and banks launched fraud investigations, examining years of financial records for potential misconduct. Joey's assets were frozen pending these investigations, leaving her financially vulnerable for the first time in her privileged life. The criminal charges filed against Joey included multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The prosecution built a case that portrayed her actions not as a desperate one-time mistake, but as a calculated series of crimes involving multiple co-conspirators. Each falsified document, each corrupted medical record, each bribed official added to the potential prison sentence she faced. James Matthews, despite his role in exposing the fraud, faced his own professional challenges. His colleagues at Boston General Hospital questioned whether his family connection to such a high-profile medical fraud case might affect his judgment as a pediatric surgeon. The hospital board required him to temporarily step back from certain administrative duties while they conducted an internal review. The Matthews Family Foundation, a cornerstone of Boston's philanthropic community, suffered immediate repercussions. Several partner organizations suspended joint initiatives, concerned about potential liability. The foundation's board of directors, led by James, had to implement new oversight measures to restore public confidence in their charitable work. Joey's co-conspirators faced their own legal battles. Harry Weber's immunity deal required his testimony in multiple fraud cases, exposing a broader network of medical record manipulation. The digital forensics investigation into Weber's laptop revealed connections to other inheritance fraud schemes, prompting several states to reopen similar cases. The civil court's findings were forwarded to multiple regulatory bodies, including the State Bar Association and Medical Licensing Board. These organizations began reviewing their procedures for validating documentation in inheritance cases, using the Matthews case to illustrate the need for enhanced verification protocols. The most lasting impact, however, was on the legal precedents set by Sheindlin's ruling. Her detailed opinion outlined new standards for examining medical evidence in inheritance cases, particularly involving pregnancy claims. Future courts would reference the Matthews case when evaluating similar frauds, with Sheindlin's methodical exposure of Joey's deception serving as a template for detecting sophisticated inheritance schemes. 1 year after Sheindlin's historic ruling in the Matthews inheritance case, the ripple effects continued to transform lives far beyond Boston's elite social circles. The morning of Joey Matthews' sentencing brought a somber close to a chapter that had redefined both a family's legacy and the landscape of inheritance law. Joey received a 3-year sentence, with a possibility of parole after 18 months. The prosecution had pushed for a harsher penalty, but Joey's eventual cooperation in exposing broader medical fraud networks had earned her some leniency. More significant than her prison term were the financial penalties. She was ordered to pay $2.4 million in fines and restitution, effectively wiping out her personal savings and future earnings for years to come. The Matthews family mansion, once the scene of lavish social gatherings, stood quiet now. James had converted it into a temporary residence for families seeking specialized medical treatment at Boston General Hospital. This transformation represented more than just a change in the property's use. It symbolized the family's shift from social prominence to community service. Eleanor's inheritance found an unexpected resolution. James, now the executor of the estate, worked with legal experts to establish the Matthews Family Fertility Foundation. The $1.2 million that had sparked such desperate deception now funded fertility treatments for couples struggling to conceive. The foundation's first grant went to a young couple whose story eerily paralleled Joey's own struggles with infertility. The scandal prompted Massachusetts legislators to draft the Matthews Act, requiring stricter verification protocols for medical documentation in inheritance cases. Hospitals across the state implemented new security measures for protecting medical records, with several healthcare institutions citing the Matthews case in their reformed policies. Joey's time in prison brought unexpected personal growth. She began counseling other women who had committed fraud out of desperation, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about the cost of deception. Her weekly therapy sessions revealed deep-seated trauma from years of feeling inadequate in her grandmother's eyes, leading to a better understanding of the psychological pressures that had driven her actions. James's career eventually recovered and flourished in unexpected ways. His experience with Joey's deception led him to develop new protocols for verifying medical documentation in his pediatric practice. He became a sought-after speaker on medical ethics, sharing insights from his unique perspective as both a doctor and the person who exposed a sophisticated medical fraud. The Matthews Family Foundation emerged stronger from the crisis. Under James's leadership, it expanded its mission to include advocacy for mental health support in wealthy communities, addressing the hidden pressures that often led to destructive behaviors like Joey's. The Foundation's annual symposium on wealth, worth, and well-being became a crucial event in Boston's philanthropic calendar. Joey's release from prison marked the beginning of a careful reconciliation with her family. While trust remained fragile, the shared trauma of the past year had created space for honest conversations about long-buried family dynamics. James's young daughter, born during Joey's incarceration, became an unexpected bridge between the siblings as Joey found a new role as an aunt rather than pursuing motherhood herself. The case's impact extended into popular culture, inspiring documentary films and case studies in law schools. Sheindlin's methodical exposure of the deception became required reading in forensic accounting programs, while medical schools incorporated the case into their ethics curricula. Perhaps the most profound change was in Boston's social landscape. The Matthews case sparked uncomfortable discussions about the pressure to maintain appearances in wealthy circles, leading several prominent families to publicly acknowledge their own struggles with infertility, mental health, and financial pressure. A decade after Eleanor Matthews had written the will that inadvertently sparked such drama, her dream of a lasting family legacy was fulfilled, though not in the way she had envisioned. The Matthews name became associated not with social status or wealth, but with transformation, redemption, and the complex journey from deception to truth. The case stood as a testament to Sheindlin's unwavering pursuit of justice and the power of truth to heal even the deepest family wounds.